All right, Chapter 4, Part 4. Bod just wandered into the pawn shop, antique shop, owned by a Banzer Bolger. And a Banzer Bolger sounds like he's going to try and get the brooch from Bod and has locked him in a storeroom and called his friend Tom. Bod realized that he was trapped when he heard the lock turn in the door. He pulled on the door, but it held fast. He felt stupid for having been lured inside, foolish for not trusting his first impulses to get far away from the sour-faced man as possible. He had broken all the rules of the graveyard, and everything had gone wrong. What would Silas say? Or the Owenses? He could feel himself beginning to panic, and he suppressed it, pushing the worry back down inside him. It would all be good. He knew that. Of course, he needed to get out. He examined the room he was trapped in. It was little more than a storeroom with a desk in it. The only entrance was the door. He opened the desk drawer, finding nothing but small pots of paint used for brightening up antiques and a paintbrush. He wondered if he would be able to throw paint in the man's face and blind him for long enough to escape. He opened the top of a pot of paint and dipped in his finger. "What are you doing?" asked a voice close to his ear. "Nothing," said Bod, screwing the top on the paint pot and dropping it into one of the jacket's enormous pockets. Liza Hempstock looked at him, unimpressed. "Why are you in here?" she asked. "And who's the old bag of lard out there?" "It's his shop. I was trying to sell him something." "Why?" "None of your beeswax," she sniffed. "Well," she said, "you should get on back to the graveyard." "I can't. He's locked me in." "Course you can. Just slip through the wall." He shook his head. "I can't. I can only do it at home because they gave me freedom of the graveyard when I was a baby." He looked up at her. Under the electric light, it was hard to see her properly, but Bod had spent his life talking to dead people. "Anyway, what are you doing here? What are you doing out from the graveyard? It's daytime, and you're not like Silas. You're meant to stay in the graveyard." She said, "There's rules for those in the graveyards, but not for those, as I was buried in unhallowed ground. Nobody tells me what to do or where to go." She glared at the door. "I don't like that man." She said, "I'm going to see what he's doing." A flicker, and Bod was alone in the room once more. He heard a rumble of distant thunder. In the cluttered darkness of Bolger's antiquities, a Banzer Bolger looked up suspiciously, certain that someone was watching him, then realized he was being foolish. "The boy's locked in the room," he told himself. "The front door's locked." He was polishing the metal clasp surrounding the snake stone, as gently and as carefully as an archaeologist on a dig, taking off the black and revealing the glittering silver beneath it. He was beginning to regret calling Tom Hustings over. Although Hustings was big and good for scaring people, he was also beginning to regret that he was going to have to sell the brooch when he was done. It was special. The more it glittered under the tiny light on his counter, the more he wanted it to be his, and only his. There was more where this came from, though. The boy would tell him. The boy would lead him to it. The boy. An idea struck him. He put down the brooch reluctantly and opened a drawer behind the counter, taking out a metal biscuit tin filled with envelopes and cards and slips of paper. He reached in and took out a card, only slightly larger than a business card. It was black-edged. There was no name or address printed on it, though, only one word, handwritten in the center in an ink that had faded to brown. Jack. On the back of the card, in pencil, a Banzer Bolger had written instructions to himself in his tiny, precise handwriting, as a reminder, although he would not have been likely to forget the use of the card. How to use it to summon the man Jack. No, not summon, invite. You did not summon people like him. A knocking on the outer door of the shop, Bolger tossed the card down onto the counter and walked over to the door, peering out into the wet afternoon. "Hurry up," called Tom Hustings. "It's miserable out here. Dismal. I'm getting soaked." Bolger unlocked the door, and Tom Hustings pushed his way in, his raincoat and hair dripping. "What's so important that you can't talk about it over the phone, then?" Our fortune, said Ebenezer Bolger with his sour face. That's what. Hustings took off his raincoat and hung it on the back of the shop door. What is it? Something good fell off the back of a lorry? Lorry means truck in England. Treasure, said Ebenezer Bolger. 2 kinds. He took his friend over to the counter, showed him the brooch under the little light. It's old, isn't it? From pagan times, said Ebenezer. Before. From Druid times, before the Romans came. It's called a snake stone. Seen 'em in museums. I've never seen metalwork like that. Or one so fine. Must have belonged to a king. The lad who found it says it came from a grave. Think of it, a barrow filled with stuff like this. Might be worth doing it legit, said Tom Hustings thoughtfully. Declare it as treasure trove. They have to pay us market value for it, and we could make them name it after us. The Hustings Bolger Bequest. Bolger Hustings, said Ebenezer automatically. Then he said, There's a few people I know of, people with real money, who'd pay far more than market value if they could hold it, as you are. For Tom Hustings was fingering the brooch gently like a man stroking a kitten, and there'd be no questions asked. He reached out a hand, and, reluctantly, Tom Hustings passed him the brooch. You said 2 kinds of treasure, said Hustings. What's t'other? Ebenezer Bolger picked up the black-edged card, held it out for his friend's inspection. Do you know what this is? His friend shook his head. Ebenezer put the card down on the counter. There's a party is looking for another party. So? The way I heard it, said Ebenezer Bolger, the other party is a boy. There's boys everywhere, said Tom Hustings. Running all around, getting into trouble. I can't abide them. So there's a party looking for a particular boy? This lad looks to be about the right age. He's dressed. Well, you'll see how he's dressed. And he found this. It could be him. And if it is him? Ebenezer Bolger picked up the card again by the edge and waved it back and forth slowly, as if running the edge of it along an imaginary flame. Here comes a candle to light you to bed, he said. And here comes a chopper to chop off your head, concluded Tom Hustings thoughtfully. But look you, if we call the man Jack, we lose the boy, and if we lose the boy, we lose the treasure. The 2 men went back and forth on it, weighing the merits and disadvantages of reporting the boy or of collecting the treasure, which had grown in their minds to a huge underground cavern filled with precious things. And as they debated, Ebenezer pulled a bottle of sloe gin from beneath the counter and poured them both a generous tot, to assist the celebrations. Liza was soon bored with their discussion, which meant back and forth and around like a whirligig, getting nowhere, and so she went back into the storeroom to find Bod standing in the middle of the room with his eyes tightly closed and his fists clenched and his face all screwed up as if he had a toothache, almost purple from holding his breath. What you a-doing of now? She asked, unimpressed. He opened his eyes and relaxed. Trying to fade, he said. Liza sniffed. Try again, she said. He did, holding his breath even longer this time. Stop that, she told him, or you'll pop. Bod took a deep breath and then sighed. It doesn't work, he said. Maybe I could hit him with a rock and just run for it. There wasn't a rock, so he picked up a colored glass paperweight, hefted it in his hand, wondering if he could throw it hard enough to stop Ebenezer Bolger in his tracks. There's 2 of them out there now, said Liza, and if the one don't get you, t'other will. They say they want to get you to show them where you got the brooch, and then dig up the grave and take the treasure. She did not tell him about the other discussion they were having, nor about the black-edged card. She shook her head. Why did you do something as stupid as this anyway? You know the rules about leaving the graveyard. Just asking for trouble, it was. Bod felt very insignificant and very foolish. I wanted to get you a headstone, he admitted in a small voice, and I thought it would cost more money, so I was going to sell him the brooch to buy you one. She didn't say anything. Are you angry? She shook her head. It's the first nice thing anyone's done for me in 500 years, she said, with a hint of a goblin smile. Why would I be angry? Then she said, What do you do? when you try to fade. What Mr. Pennyworth told me. I am an empty doorway. I am a vacant alley. I am nothing. Eyes will not see me. Glances slip over me. But it never works. It's because you're alive, said Liza with a sniff. There's stuff as works for us, the dead, who have to fight to be noticed at the best of times, and won't never work for you people. She hugged herself tightly, moving her body back and forth as if she were debating something. Then she said, It's because of me you got into this. Come here, Nobody Owens. He took a step towards her in that tiny room, and she put her cold hands on his forehead. It felt like a wet silk scarf against his skin. Now, she said, perhaps I can do a good turn for you. And with that she began to mutter to herself, mumbling words that Bod could not make out. Then she said, clear and loud, Be whole, be dust, be dream, be wind, be night, be dark, be wish, be mind. Now slip, now slide, now move unseen, above, beneath, betwixt, between. Something huge touched him, brushed him from head to feet, and he shivered. His hair prickled, and his skin was all goose flesh. Something had changed. What did you do? He asked. Just gived you a helping hand, she said. I may be dead, but I'm a dead witch, remember, and we don't forget. But, hush up, she said. They're coming back. The key rattled in the storeroom lock. Now then, chummy, said a voice Bod had not heard clearly before. I'm sure we're going to all get going to be great friends. And with that, Tom Hustings pushed open the door. Then he stood in the doorway looking around, looking puzzled. He was a big man with foxy red hair and a bottle-red nose. Here, Ebenezer, I thought you said he was in here. I did, said Bolger from behind him. Well, I can't see hide nor hair of him. Bolger's face appeared behind the ruddy man's, and he peered into the room. Hiding, he said, staring straight at where Bod was standing. No use hiding, he announced loudly. I can see you there. Come on out. The two men walked into the little room, and Bod stood stock-still between them and thought of Mr. Pennyworth's lessons. He did not react. He did not move. He let the men's glances slide from him without seeing him. You're going to wish you'd come out when I called, said Bolger, and he shut the door. Right, he said to Tom Hustings. You block the door so he can't get past. And with that, he walked around the room, peering behind things and bending awkwardly to look beneath the desk. He walked straight past Bod and opened the cupboard. Now I see you, he shouted. Come out. Liza giggled. What was that? Asked Tom Hustings, spinning around. I didn't hear nothing, said Ebenezer Bolger. Liza giggled again. Then she put her lips together and blew, making a noise that began as a whistling and then sounded like a distant wind. The electric lights in the little room flickered and buzzed. Then they went out. Bloody fuses, said Ebenezer Bolger. Come on, this is a waste of time. The key clicked in the lock, and Liza and Bod were left alone in the room. That's where I'm going to stop for now. Oh, man. Pretty neat that Liza was able to help Bod with his fading. I wonder what will happen next.